Okay, well, hello guys. Today I'm here with a great guy called Dr. Robert King. And Dr. Robert King's interests are in biological psychology, behavioral ecology, and philosophy of mind. His research focuses on using a biological framework to investigate human behavior, and examples of his research include examining the UK riots, spree killing, and bare-knuckle fighting traditions. He has also investigated the fertility-related aspects of human female sexual response and aspects of human dating preferences from a biological standpoint. Very, very interesting indeed. So today we're going to be talking about spree killings or mass shootings, which, as we all know, there's a current epidemic of them, especially in America. So, Rob, if I may call you Rob.
Please do, yes.
Great. What are the most common characteristics or patterns
Mhm.
observed in spree killings?
Well, this okay. So, one of the things I realized when I first started looking at this stuff, and it was nearly 10 years ago now, was that there's lots of people in different spheres. So there's law enforcement, there's mental health people, there's criminologists, and quite a lot of them are describing something that's very similar, but not quite the same. And a lot of the definitions vary. So there's lots of different names for very similar things. There's similar names for what are quite different things, and the field of study is something of a mess. I mean, then it's not that there aren't people who try to cut through that mess. There are some great researchers who have, but America has deliberately hampered itself. It actually made the study of gun crime as a health issue illegal until 2012, and it was actually an act of Congress, meaning that you couldn't study it in America. And so what that means is that there is an entire generation of researchers who've just been hamstrung by what is a political element to it. Now, I only discovered this myself when we sort of blundered into it. But I'm not remotely interested in gun control. We put in certain features when we were studying the data about things like availability of guns, concealed carry laws, and various things of that, just by being to be good scientists, just to bring in control mechanisms, to see what things were affecting it. And it turns out very few of those things actually did affect any of it, which is interesting in itself. But we got huge pushback from reviewers because of the gun control issue, and also because of another issue. But we would get it from both sides, left and right. The left don't like the idea that human behavior can be understood biologically, and the right don't like any suggestion of gun control. So we got it from both sides. I haven't answered
Right.
your sorry, I haven't
Yeah,
answered your question, have I?
that you have. You actually have. Yeah. So, but apart from the gun control, what other factors do you
Yeah,
think contribute for like apart from the obvious gun regulations
yeah,
or gun or non-regulation in America, what
sure.
other factors?
It boils down to, I mean, if I was to answer it in a word, it boils down to status. Males move in seas of status, and that status is closely linked to their formidability or their perceived formidability. Now, I mean, using the word status, that's a big word, and it covers an awful lot of things. So there's a difference between status and prestige, and there's a difference between that and fame and all sorts of things. But to boil it down to what matters in this case, men are not allowed to be weak. Men are not allowed to lose face, and this isn't although you're quite right saying that there's been a sort of recent upsurge. It's not a new phenomenon. We've got this. Used to be called a culture-bound syndrome called running amok. We still have it in the language, to run amok, and that's a Malay word, and it refers back to things that were happening in the 18th and 19th centuries. And I'm almost certain they were happening beforehand as well. They just weren't being recorded, where a young man would have some kind of unbearable assault on his honor or status, and he would go into a kind of trance-like state and start killing innocent civilians, but usually with knives, and typically he gets subdued by the local villagers, and that's one element of it. And the moment we looked at that, we said, well, this is quite a lot like some of the school shootings. You've got a young man who's had some kind of recent status loss, and that was one of the biggest markers we found, some kind of perceived status loss. But then when we actually got the data, so I should shout out to my then student and now colleague Nadia Butler. She's the one who created the database, which we used for the initial study. She's off being a forensic psych in Liverpool now, last I found. And when she started looking at the data, and we started, well, actually, the first thing she found was that there were a whole load of things that looked like spree, because a spree killing is 5 or more. as defined by the FBI, in 2 or more locations, although that definition has shifted a bit. The first thing she found was, well, look, there seem to be an awful lot of people in places like, say, China, who've attacked people with knives, or they've attacked people with vehicles. And they tend not to be technically seen as spree killings, because quite often they don't kill as many people. They're obviously trying to, but they're just, knives aren't as efficient as guns, and vehicles aren't as efficient as guns. So that was the first thing, and that was interesting. We parked that idea because she had plenty to work with in the first part. We sort of parked all those data. The second thing is, once we put the data, we use a technique called structural equation modeling, and you put the data in and sort of turn the statistical crank, and it shows you classes of a typology. And what we found, and I'm not suggesting this is the last word. It's a way. Evolution is a lens to look at behavior through. Okay, it's not an either or thing. It's not a sort of, it's either this or it's that. Evolutionary theory gives you some tools to look at certain behavior and go, oh, okay, this is an angle of it that we hadn't appreciated. And what we found, interestingly, was the median age for spree killers, I think, was 33. But that's actually highly misleading, because there was actually highly bimodal distribution. You had a bunch who were about 42, and they had a bunch who were about 20, and the bunch who were about 20 were not the younger version of the older ones. It wasn't that, sort of, you wanted to be a spree killer when you were 20 and you didn't make it, but you hunkered down and you achieved your career goals when you're 40. They were completely different profiles. The younger ones tended to be school refusers, possibly had a history of mental illness. They were more likely to die. They were less likely to die during the commission of the crimes. The older ones tended to have families, they tend to have jobs, but they were in the process of losing either or both of those, and they were less likely. They were more likely to die during the commission of the crimes. And that's interesting, because if you look at human reproductive value, the male reproductive value curve sort of goes up slowly as males acquire status, which is closely linked to their reproductive value, and then sort of bottoms out, and then it sort of gradually tapers off. Whereas with women, it's a spike which follows their fertility. But the thing that was interesting was that if you drew a tangent on that male reproductive curve, the upswing would be the 20-year-old bunch, and the downswing would be the 42-year-old bunch, and that was interesting. No one else had seen that. You've got a bunch of people who are acquiring status, or sorry, they're at a stage where they should be acquiring status, but all the markers that they weren't. And this is a kind of a way of attracting attention. And then you've got these people who had acquired status, and often families, but now were losing it, or had credible reason to think they were about to lose it. And this is a Hail Mary kind of, if I can't have you, no one will. And they're not similar to each other. And I'm not saying, and once again, I'm not suggesting that this exhausts all the possibilities. We specifically excluded religious types, the obviously politically motivated, and various other kinds of things. And I think we were right to do it in the initial study, but that it complicates things, because it's often quite hard to draw a hard and fast division between someone who's ideologically committed to some political or quasi-political or religious thing and someone who isn't. So although we did bring that, and I'm glad we did, because I thought it clarified certain things. Subsequent research, we're going to include some of those ideological things, because and that's one of the things that's happened in the last 10 years. We've become more aware of things like the incel movement, the way that certain kinds of males have taken advantage of the fact that there is a class of men who are increasingly seeing themselves as dateless, and they're drawing on them. People like Andrew Tate, would be an obvious example, is in the news, of someone who's sort of taking these young men and recognizing their rudderless qualities, let's say, and cynically making money off the back of them. But it's from that sort of class of people who think that they're destined to reproductive oblivion that you're drawing the younger class of spree killer.
So it sounds like it's a case of resource allocation, really, in so like some of the younger guys and some of the older guys, where it's kind of like.
I don't think it's as closely linked. It's because some of these people, they can be quite well off, and everybody in the West is comparatively well off compared to, say, 100 years ago. It's a lot of it's much more about perceived status. It's the perception. There's a concept called the operational sex ratio. So the great biologist Ronald Fisher introduced the idea of the operational sex ratio. And that's an operational sex ratio 1 would mean you've got one man for every woman. And that most cultures, it's about that. I think Ireland is 0.99, which is it. And when the operational sex ratio gets above a certain level, about sort of 1.1, so sort of 110 men for every 100 women, then, and this isn't just this isn't unique to humans, you start getting the males start producing abhorrent behaviors, rape, riots, and things that sort of dramatically attract status to themselves. I'm hesitant to use the word pushed because it sounds like I'm exonerating them, and I don't want to be saying that kind of thing. But put it this way: if you go down to you can see this on the lakes. If you go down and watch the ducks mating, ducks will pair bond, yes, and they'll swim around perfectly happy. You have a male duck and a female duck, and they'll pair off and they'll produce offspring. If there are too many males around, the males gang up on the females, and you actually see this happening down on the pond, and they gang up on them to such an extent they occasionally drown them in their attempts to mate with them. And the female's response to this is to evolve these extremely intricate vaginas, which ducks are unusual. Most birds don't have penises or intramiscular organs, but ducks do because of their forced copulation behaviors. And the females have evolved counter responses, which is a vagina which can actually shut out certain kinds of sperm. So you've got a little war going on there. And with humans, you don't have a war going on in the same kind of way. It's not, we fight these things out culturally rather than physically, typically. I mean, we without physical adaptations. And what we seem to be finding with the younger type of spree killer is that they are trying to, and now they're conscious of it. They're trying to advertise themselves to an audience.
What do you mean through like Andrew Tate's that kind of stuff? Or?
No, I'm thinking that there are actual. This was the second paper we did. We looked at hybristophiles. So these are people, or almost exclusively women, who fetishize killers. And because of the internet, these people are now becoming much more consciously aware of each other and are consciously communicating with each other to some extent. They're putting on a show for each other. And I'm not saying this isn't the only reason that this is happening, but that was our second paper. That's just come out in Journal of Police and Criminal Psychology, the one on hybristophiles.
What do you mean by putting on a show? Like it's almost like a display of power or something when they.
No, there's no almost about it. I mean, they're consciously showing that they're formidable, and you might go, how on earth could you think that they're killing children? So I'll come back to that thought because it's a very reasonable thought. But it works on a certain. There are a group of women who, well, we've always known there's a group of women who fetishize killers. Was it Ted Bundy? Was actually, he's actually sitting in court, one of the jurors who's actually, he's actually heard the evidence of what he does to women, proposes marriage to him, and you're sort of thinking, what on earth could you? I mean, do you think you can change him? And there are some people who think they can change them. There's a group of hybristophiles who think you don't understand him, I understand him, and I can change him, and they're one group, and they're the majority. But there's a small class that we found who are very much in the minority, who actually fetishize the killing itself and show every sign of wanting to join in on it, and write about it, in disturbing detail, and produce fan fiction about it and all sorts. Yeah.
So you mean that the females want to join in, or is it,
there's a group of females who want to join in. There's no, I'm not saying they're necessarily the reason for the first class existing, but they are it shows that the signaling is working to some people, and I'm sympathetic to the idea. I mean, some people have suggested that we shouldn't name these people, and I'm sympathetic to that. I mean, I can see why some would go, they're trying to chase fame, they're trying to chase notoriety, really. But if they think that keeping their name out of the Guardian is going to do it, then they're afraid they're very naive. I mean, these people communicate on the internet. They can communicate through various. I mean, unless you're going to shut down the internet, you're not going to be able to prevent these people being known to the people they want to be known by. If that makes sense. At least, well, I mean, I'm not a techie. I mean, get someone who's an infosec expert on. Maybe they could come up with some way of doing it. But it's not going to be as simple as the newspapers just having some gentleman's agreement not to mention the names of the killers, because they'll get out there for others. I mean, some of them actually filmed themselves doing it. I forgot his name now, but the chap, the Christchurch massacre guy, he actually filmed it and put it on Facebook Live while he was doing it. Oh
yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And it's very hard to shut down the servers of everybody who might share that kind of thing. So yes, and I suppose then the other thing that changed in the last few years was the production of so-called manifestos, and that's why, looking back on it, it was. I mean, I stand by our decision to leave out the politically motivated ones initially. However, some of these people are becoming more explicitly political or at least sort of quasi, but Ted Kaczynski kind of political. I mean, there is some kind of political thing going on there. There's some kind of and quite often they get hold of some sort of cod version of evolution as well, which is interesting. So some of these people think they're they're exhibiting natural selection or something like this, and you get certain sort of well, how to put it? You get some cod versions of evolutionary theory, sort of supporting their supposedly supporting their actions, which of course is
For like reproductive competition, that sort of thing, or
yes, yeah. I mean, on one level, the incels have kind of got half of the story, haven't they? They kind of got a bit of it. I mean, they're aware of the fact that selection falls more. I mean, they wouldn't put it this way, but selection falls more heavily on males than females. Historically, most females got to reproduce, most males didn't. It's only quite recently that that's changed with things like sort of socially imposed monogamy and so on. But if you look at our genetics, then you can separate us out. We have mitochondrial DNA from the mum and Y chromosome DNA from the dad. And if you look at human populations, then you can see that 80% of women got to reproduce and 40% of men did. We have twice as many mums as dads. Well, how could that be? Well, because quite often you had the same dad. It's the answer. Which meant that certain males are being shut out. Now. So I was talking about. So what this means is that as the actual operational sex ratio might be one number, but the perceived operational sex ratio might be a completely different number. You might be in a world actually where there's you could pair off and you'd find a partner, you'd all be happy. However, I think for a lot of these people it doesn't feel like that. And I suspect that if there is an upswing in this, and we haven't really looked at that, but I suspect the internet is probably partly responsible for pushing some males into thinking that they're basically no-hopers. That wouldn't say anything about the older ones, incidentally. That would, I can't imagine that would have any particular impact on the older ones, but on the younger ones, yes, possibly, yeah. A bit lumping them all together, of course, wouldn't be helpful there.
That's like social stressors that come onto the individual. And what about evolutionary mismatch? What does that mean? What does that mean?
Oh, well, I mean, this is a behavior that might have worked in the past in order to if you hauled off and killed some people in the past, there wouldn't be a police force to round you up. Now the villagers might do it, or they might use you in battle or something like that. But you didn't have a police force that would come along and shoot you. So you could your tantrum, your sort of massive display of anger would have an effect on your reputation. And this connects to what I was saying earlier about sort of how on earth could this be the case when the victims are children, which they are with the school shooters. And there's I think there's a clue here with there's work by a guy called Jose Delgado, who's this he's a Spanish neuroscientist. Most of his work was in the 1960s, and he's not well known in the West, particularly because he published mostly in Spanish. But if you YouTube him, the thing he's probably most famous for is stopping a bull in its tracks, because he was Spanish, so bull seems appropriate. So his thing was implanting electrodes, so finding those areas of the brain that control particular behaviors. And he was interested in lots of things, but especially in aggression. So you find the aggression center in the bull, which is somewhere around the amygdala. You have a radio control device, the bull's charging at you, he presses the button, the bull suddenly goes, oh, I feel happy. So that's kind of spectacular.
Really? And it actually worked?
Oh yeah, you find that on YouTube.
Wow, okay.
I think, I mean, he said he did it on telly sometime around the 1960s. I mean, that's interesting and fun, but I don't think it's the most insightful one. I think the one for me that was his most insightful one, and I haven't got video footage of that one, but he had hierarchical apes, rhesus macaques, who, like us, they're hierarchical monkeys, and he implanted electrodes into their brains to stimulate the aggression center, not to turn it off, to actually stimulate it. Have you ever seen that scene in Kingsman, where there's a sound that makes everybody aggressive? So it's it's a spy thriller, but it is sort of sci-fi spy thriller, and it's Colin Firth is the guy, and there's a scene in a church which is a very well choreographed fight scene where they've got a sound that basically does the same thing, and they all just there's a massive melee and they all attack each other. Now, it's a good scene, it's well choreographed, but it's not what would happen. And we kind of know this because Delgado did this with rhesus macaques, with implants of aggression. And what happens is that the alpha male, now we don't have alpha males with humans, we're not quite the same, but you have dominant males anyway. But the alpha male would attack the beta males. The beta males will either attack each other or the females, and the females would try and protect the young. So in other words, the hierarchy was preserved with the aggression. It wasn't just a question of pressing the button and everybody attacks everybody. Aggression isn't, or whatever we might like to think, because social scientists, we tend to be a bit sort of lily-livered liberal types, and sort of, oh, violence, it must be antisocial. But and you say, no, it's quite often quite instrumental. And people worry about this because they worry that saying that is tantamount to saying that it's justified, which of course, be clear about your morality and don't get it tangled up in your science would be my, advice here. Be clear about what's right and wrong. And if you feel the need to announce the fact that murdering children is wrong, I kind of feel you've kind of gone off the rails a bit. That should really be obvious. I shouldn't need to have to say that. But some people feel the need to sort of say, well, of course this violence is mindless, of course it's antisocial. And no, it's not true. It's not mindless at all. It's achieving a goal. Now, it's not achieving a goal that we want. It's not achieving a goal that we'd like to support. But there's a huge denial of human nature. I think there's and this is why we get the pushback from one particular political wing. There's this idea that if we only just covered up certain aspects of human nature, then they'd go away. And I think that's, firstly, it's false. And you always get found out when you lie. And secondly, it's grossly irresponsible, because it means you can't really institute mechanisms to try and head off certain things. If you're just denying that something is the case, then it's just going to keep on happening, isn't it?
How do pharmaceutical drugs play into this whole scenario? Like, would that be a lot to do with the increase in mass shootings in the last 20 years?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't have any research that's been done specifically on people who were drugged up while they were doing the killing. There might be. I would suspect if there's a connection, it's via other kinds of status-related things. So have you ever come across a book called Deaths of Despair?
Can't say I have, no.
So there was a book on sociology. I can't remember the authors off the top of my head, but it's a good book, well worth a read. And it talks about suicides and parasuicides in America, and how the suicide rate has gone up, but also the parasuicidal rate has gone up. So this is people who haven't actually sort of, you can't be sure that they've actually killed themselves, but they've got blind drunk for a month in a row and they've fallen down the stairs. They've taken fentanyl, for so long that they've fallen down in a puddle of their own vomit and suffocated. And all right, it might not be suicide, but it's not quite an accident either. It's in a sort of liminal state between the two of those things. And I if there's a connection, I would guess it's via the fact that what we're seeing with things like fentanyl is a lot of people who are in various sort of states of pain, whether or not you're drawing from that population for the older type of spree killer. I really couldn't say. It would be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them were people who also showed signs of long-term alcohol and drug abuse, because a relationship doesn't just sort of, well, it doesn't usually just end overnight, does it? Typically there'd be some kind of pattern of neglect and the relationship falling apart, and that might well be connected with drugs. But I can't think of any direct connection. Sorry, maybe I'll think of something cleverer to say.
No, that was insightful, very insightful. What about psychiatric disorders in general? How often do they play in? Obviously, the person is a bit crazy if he's going to go out, or she maybe in a rare instance, and kill people. But in general, what about psychiatric disorders in general? How do they play into it?
Yeah, we'd really like that to be true, wouldn't we? In the same way, we'd really like it to be video games that causes male violence. There is some degree of connection, but it so far it lacks any kind of really patterned connection. I mean, there's a non-accidental relation between people with mental health issues and these kinds of crimes. However, an awful lot of them don't have any identifiable mental illness, particularly the older ones.
It was like that guy, the guy that was in San Diego, I think, who shot from the hotel all the people that were in the concert. There was like, there was nothing wrong.
One in Vegas.
Vegas, yeah.
He didn't have anything that I'm aware of.
I don't think he did. No,
I don't think he had any diagnosis, and an awful lot of them don't. And some of the younger ones have had certain kinds of diagnosis, but they tend to be it tends to be educational stuff. And I hope it should go without saying, but most people who have some level of educational issue are not remotely dangerous. So if there is a connection, it's very, very indirect. It's only connected because they felt excluded at school and those kinds of things. I was at a conference recently where there was this it felt almost a little bit sort of needy, that we sort of really wanted these people to be, autistic, and they're just, some of them are, but most of them aren't, and a lot of people are self-diagnosing as being autistic. So it's highly unreliable. I mean, in terms of them not fitting in socially, sure. I mean, that's frequently the case, particularly with the younger ones, but it's not always the case there either. Their response, it would be really nice if we could just establish one thing, that we could see here and go, yeah, no, it's always that, but we haven't found one yet, and I suspect we won't, because a lot of what we regard as mental health, or I'm in a tricky position here as a psychologist, because on the one hand, it's very good that we have a much more compassionate attitude to mental health than we previously did. And it's unarguably true. It's much, as I look out my window, there's a psychiatric hospital on the hill that we no longer put people in, and it's a very good thing. However, there are some downsides, which is the division between mental health and mental ill health is often not very easy to find, and quite often a lot of the things that we think of as being mentally unhealthy, from an evolutionary perspective, are facultative adaptations to local conditions. They're not ill health in the same way. It's uncontrovertible that Alzheimer's is something just going wrong with the brain. Yeah, there's no upside to Alzheimer's. There's no upside to a broken leg. But is a fever an illness? Well, yes and no. I mean, it's not nice to have it, but it's a response to a pathogen. So if you suppress the fever response, you're actually suppressing the body's immune response to that pathogen, and that can actually do some damage. Well, an awful lot of things that we regard as being mentally unhealthy, and they may well be mentally unhealthy in a sort of social sense, are quite understandable as responses to local conditions. Depression is a classic example. I mean, quite often what presents itself as depression actually makes perfect sense as a way of sort of signaling to that person that they're in a horrible situation, they need to move. So I should stress, I'm not a clinician, I'm a researcher, but if you imagine I was a clinician and a patient came to me, and she's in an abusive relationship, she's in a horrible job, house, we're just reading about one recently. There was a house not far from where I'm staying at the moment where literal excrement is coming down through the roof from above, because the place is in such disrepair, and her landlord is such a piece of shit that he can get away with this, and I just kind of go, oh, here's a pill, there you go, here's a happy pill, that's taking your I mean, I'm not being a responsible practitioner if I do that. If she's suffering from depression, then that's a perfectly understandable response to her situation.
So in the case of spree killings, early intervention isn't something that it'd be.
We don't have enough information.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, having said that, a large number of the younger ones do show warning signs online. Although I wouldn't want to stick my neck out and say I'd pick out the dangerous ones from the ones who aren't dangerous, just by eye. But in the case of the older ones, I'd be very surprised if you could see anything much coming, unless you were seeing it coming because you were a social worker, and you've been repeatedly called to instances of children being beaten up in the house or something like that. Those might be warning signs, but distinguishing those from the vast majority of those cases where I feel very sorry for social workers, because it's an impossible situation, isn't it? You're either breaking up families or you're leaving it too late. It's a no-win situation. And I don't know of one where there's a winning formula for this either, I'm afraid. Sorry.
People who commit these spree killings, do they plan? Do they have plans, or do they?
Do, yeah.
So then maybe if you could, the percentage of people who plan these things, that could be an indicator of early intervention, I guess. If you could
stockpiling, yes, absolutely. Yeah. Stockpiling weapons was definitely a factor, and we found that to be a factor in the first study. And the police, police aren't idiots. There was one not so long ago in the Czech Republic where somebody was stockpiling weapons in their shed, and he was, I think he was in contact with Anders Breivik, and he wanted to carry out a Breivik-like attack. And the police sort of nipped him in the bud. It's trickier in the States, of course, because stockpiling weapons. I mean, you've got a state where the state governor has just sort of said, I don't think anyone should even need a permit to carry a concealed firearm, and there isn't a general outcry against that. That's got, that seems perfectly sensible that people should be walking around with the ability to kill each other at a moment's notice, with absolutely no. I think everyone outside of the state, or almost everyone outside the state, just finds not just the proliferation of guns, but just the attitude to them is just, I don't know if you ever had friends or colleagues who've had to use firearms for a living. I mean, I've had a couple over the years, and for those who take it seriously, it's a burden. You have to keep yourself trained constantly so that you're not a liability to everyone around you. And that's never discussed. Everyone talks about their gun rights. They never talk about, well, it's really onerous to have to go on these bi-yearly gun management courses for a couple of weeks where have you seen these things where they wear the helmets, they got real guns, but they fire paint, but you get splashed with it, and you put people in these situations and see what happens. And you can YouTube these. They're hilarious. I mean, they're hilarious unless you think about the implications. You throw a bit of stress into the mix, and people are pulling out their guns and shooting their friends in the back, and it's just have you seen that scene in Unforgiven? It's kind of like that. If everyone's got this idea of what a gun battle is like, no, that's not what it's like.
Divorce from reality.
Yeah.
How do social media and online communities contribute to this, to people planning these and doing these?
Well, with the hybristophiles, this was the second study we got published. There's a definite connection there. You've got a fan base who are quite explicit about it. Our initial study was on Tumblr sites. Am I very out of date now? Has Tumblr now disappeared? I do rely on my students a lot for things like social media stuff. So it might be that Tumblr's now defunct. So that's certainly the case. In the case of things like Facebook, people like that, the Christchurch murderer, he was explicitly sharing his stuff on Facebook, and I'm not quite. Facebook's very tight about their protocols for this. I know they've got people whose entire job it is just to filter some of the horrible things that would otherwise appear on the net, and those people go through quite a lot of stress. Certainly that's an issue. I also think there are sites where sort of variously called the manosphere, where people are egging each other on. I think that's part of it. I think also slightly more subtly, the internet creates a situation where you are perceived, particularly as a guy, as a loser more often. So the classic one is, I don't know what it is on Twitter, but it's something like, isn't it 10% of the guys on Twitter get something like 98% of the swipes? And I haven't actually studied this, although I'm kind of interested in doing so. My impression is that would create a sense of a skewed operational sex ratio, that actually being on there, would create, because it's not actually as bad as that. But I mean, if you could you
sorry to interrupt you, could you say that again? 80% of the what?
I might be getting my figure. Don't quote me on this, because I might get the figures wrong. But most men on Twitter are rated as below average attractiveness. Okay, and that's exactly what you'd expect of a species like ours. I mean, the burden of reproduction doesn't fall evenly. So women are in the driving seat, so they are in the position of looking there and going, nope, and they can do that on some extremely arbitrary criteria. Why? Because they're for every guy they swipe, is it swipe left for reject?
Oh, I think you're talking about the other dating app. What's it called?
What did I call it? Twitter. Sorry, I'm thinking of Tinder. I beg your pardon.
Tinder, excuse me. Yeah, Tinder. Yeah.
Sorry, I misspoke. This is how out of touch I am. I did warn you. Like I said, I rely on my students. So Tinder. Yeah. So most of the men on there are regarded as unattractive. So, but for every guy that you swipe off, there are 200 others going, pick me, pick me, pick me. Now that gives the women a huge sense of abundance. And puts them in the seat of, well, I mean, possibly they actually get overwhelmed with the choice. I mean, that's probably an interesting thing that's happened to us as well, in that just being overwhelmed with that number of choices, because we know that if you give people too many choices, that can paralyze you as well. We know that if you're in the supermarket and we give you 7 jams and you taste them all, you go, right, you pick one, are you happy with it? Yes. If we give you 50 jams or even 20 jams, you were much less likely to be happy with it. And I suspect something like that might be happening to the women on the dating apps.
And even, I guess even women that might be considered below the average are getting a lot of attention through that as well, which just adds to the.
So there's a skew going that way. But for the guys, there's a small sliver, about 10% of them, who are being regarded as attractive. They're getting all the attention. That's probably not doing them. I mean, it's doing them good in some ways. I'm sure they're loving it. But I mean, in terms of it making them into the kinds of guys who are likely to commit, my guess is that's probably not what's happening to them. But for the ones who are not getting that kind of swiping, I mean, all of these things are demographic shifts. It's not an all or nothing thing. But there is an increasing population of guys who are perceiving themselves as being just undateable. And they may or may not be undateable, but there are certainly some people out there who are willing to profit off their confusion and misery.
These are the incels we hear about in the media.
Yes. There are. Have you come across the black pillars?
No, but the term is familiar to me. I don't actually know what it's about. I know what the red pill is about, but the black pill, not quite.
So the red pill is from the Matrix. You got, so you take the red pill, and show Keanu Reeves what reality is, and blue pill you don't. So there's the red pillars, and the red pillars have sort of got half of a story about evolution in there, and they've kind of misunderstood it, but they kind of got a bit of it. The black pillars, though, have decided to mix a sort of cod version of evolutionary theory with a sort of nihilism, and then go, right, well, since your genome is fixed at birth, there is literally nothing you can do, since women only select for genetic qualities, and genetic qualities are and genes are fixed, which they're completely wrong about, incidentally. I mean, your genome is fixed at birth, your genotype is fixed at birth, but your phenotype isn't. So, I mean, I wish people would read more than one chapter of a biology book. I really do. I wish they wouldn't just read one chapter that sort of satisfies whatever's on their mind at the moment, and then just kind of go, right, okay, I'm going to go. If they'd read the rest of the book, they might learn something useful. And one of the things they might learn is that, okay, your genotype might be fixed at birth, but your phenotype certainly isn't. And if you worked on yourself a bit, had a wash, went to the gym, got a decent job, stopped spending your time on sites where people are egging you on to think that women are all, rapacious gold diggers, you might do better. I'm sorry, I'm being facetious, but I mean, I think all of that stuff, can look quite funny from the outside, from a guy of my age who's, I'm out of the market. So I'm just looking in as a researcher. I wasn't brought up with that. I wasn't brought up with that as my reality. I was brought up with a rather old-fashioned reality, from the idea that you could make something of yourself, and if you did, there would be people who found you attractive, and the ones that didn't, that's fine. That's also okay. Then you don't have to be bitter about them. They're just, you just didn't match up for whatever reason. But if you worked on yourself and put yourself out there, you would run into people who find you attractive, and vice versa. That sense seems to have been somewhat lost. And can I digress for like 2 minutes? Please. There's there's a really famous paper by the Whitings. They were a husband and wife team of anthropologists in the 1970s, and they studied a bunch of societies, and they divided them along an axis of aloof to intimate. And intimate societies are ones where the men and women more or less live together, more or less get along as much as men and women ever do. They share childcare, sleep together, live in the same hut. There's always a sexual division of labor, tending towards the men hunting the big game, the women doing the bulk of the calorie stuff. But they more or less get along. And then with the aloof cultures, the men and women live in different parts of the village. Sometimes they live in different villages. Sometimes they have a separate language, which the other sex doesn't talk. They'll have separate myth cycles where the men are all represented as these rapacious monsters, and the women are these evil witches who will steal your power. And the elders sort of impose this on the youngsters. And sometimes these are called female gardening ecologies, which is sort of anthropology speak for the women do all the real work, while the men just sort of puff themselves up and make magnificent spears and fly into rages. Now, you can sort of see where I'm going with this, can't you? The mechanisms for aloof societies are there in humans. That is a possible way to live. I think it's not the one I would pick, let's put it that way. I mean, I'm cognizant of my anthropology friends who want to rush in and be relativistic and go, every culture is the same. But I personally would rather not live in an aloof culture, where I'm expected to defend my honor with lethal force, that I regard women as the enemy, and so on and so on. But yeah, I'd rather live in a rather more wishy-washy kind of liberal kind of where we sort of get along culture. But I can see the seeds of aloof. I'm not suggesting we're going to turn into an aloof culture. Yeah, that couldn't happen with a complex society like ours. But I do think the seeds for aloof cultures are there in our brains, and you can see them working their ways out in certain online communities, which can become single sex and self-reinforcing of certain kinds of myths. And I think that's roughly what you're getting with some of the incel community. I think you're getting with some of the radical feminist communities as well, incidentally. I mean, I think
in what sense?
For the radical feminist ones.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there are female separatist groups who will sort of argue, and you can sort of, I mean, if you look at the male communities, you can sort of see their point. They're going that these men all hate us, and they want to rape us, and their idea of interacting with a woman is absolutely abhorrent. And you sort of go, yeah, I can, yeah, it is. You can see your point there. And they're sort of arguing for lesbian separatism. Like I said, if I was a woman with exposed to those kinds of things, I might join them. But in the case of the incels, I think you're talking about online communities where the men are encouraging this kind of thing. I think Andrew Tate is just one manifestation of that. He's literally one of these guys who sees women as the enemy, puffs himself up, has a load of sort of easily led male followers who want to see him as some kind of guru figure, and yeah, I mean that would be sort of classic aloof culture behavior. And also, sorry, go on.
No. So
does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, it does. It does make sense, and I was following your logic the whole way through. But as an aside, media coverage in general, right? For example, when the way they sensationalize like shootings, and that would almost instigate a response from one of these incels to go and do the same thing. So yeah, they're getting their information from